and here we are with lesson 9 now on dividing integers. So today students will be able to determine the rule for dividing integers. Students will be able to write division problems as related multiplication problems. And this is important for many real-world problems like finding out how much money you owe to each friend if you borrowed a whole bunch of money from a bunch of friends. All right, so let's look at what you would have talked about in previous grades. So let's look at the relationship between multiplication and division. So we know that if we have 6 times 2 equals 12, that means 12 divided by 2 equals 6, or 12 divided by 6 equals 2. You should remember these little multiplying and division families. What about negative 5 times 4 equals negative 20? So, okay, that means negative 20 divided by 4 would equal negative 5. And negative 20 divided by negative 5 would equal positive 4. So you'll see that it actually follows the same rules as multiplying because we're splitting into groups. Negative 5 groups of 4 would be negative 20. Or 4 groups of negative 5 would be negative 20. And so it works the same for division. Negative 20 then split up into 4 groups would be negative 5. Or negative 20 split up into negative 5 groups would be positive 4. All right, so let's look at more of these little families, these little multiplying and division relations. So we know 3 times something is 12. Well, we figure out that something by doing 12 divided by 3, which equals 4. So that means 3 times 4 is 12. All right, something times 6 is 42. What can we multiply 6 by to get 42? Well, that's 7, which means 42 divided by 6 equals 7. Negative 9 times something is negative 72. To get to 72, we must have had 8. And it was 8 groups of negative 9, and so that's going to stay at positive 8 there. So negative 72 divided into negative 9 groups equals positive 8. How about negative 7 times something equals positive 56? Well, I know to get to 56 I needed 8. The opposite of 7 times 8, though, would have been negative 56, so we need the opposite of the opposite for that one. All right, so that means 56 divided by negative 7 gives us negative 8. All right, something times negative 3 gives us positive 9. So we know that this has to be a 3, but if it were just the opposite of this, that would have been a negative 9. So it's the opposite of the opposite of. There we go. So that must have been negative 3, which tells us 9 divided by negative 3 will equal negative 3. All right, how about number 6? Something times 4 equals 48. Well, sorry, negative 48. So we know the number part's going to be 12, but in order to make that a negative 48, this must have been negative 12, which tells me that negative 48 divided by 4 equals negative 12 is the related division problem. Over here, they wrote the numbers on this side, negative 36 divided by 6. Well, we know the number part would be 6, but that's the opposite, so it's the opposite. There we go, negative 6, which tells us 6 times negative 6 is equal to negative 36. All right, how about this side? 88 divided by negative 8. We know the number part's 11, but it's the opposite of that, so it's negative 11. And so over here, that tells me negative 8 times negative 11 gives us positive 88. So there's our related multiplication and division facts. Let's try that for these. Create a related multiplication problem for each quotient. So 12 divided by negative 3, we know 12 divided by 3 is 4, but the opposite of that is going to be negative 4. And so, there you go. 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4 because negative 4 times negative 3 is equal to positive 12. How about this one? Negative 8 divided by negative 2. We know 8 divided by 2 is 4. The opposite of that would be negative 4, but the opposite of negative 4, again, would be back to positive 4. And this is because 4 times negative 2 gives us negative 8. All right, how about this one? Negative 40 divided by 10. 40 divided by 10 we know is 4. The opposite of that would be negative 4 because I promise not all of these are going to be 4. because negative 4 times 10 is what gets us negative 40. All right, how about 96 and 12? 96 divided by 12. Let's guess and check here, just in case you don't know. Let's check times 8. 2 times 8 is 16, 8, and one more is 9. Okay, so it was an 8. So that gives us an 8 right there. The opposite would be negative 8, but the opposite would be back to positive 8. And that's because 8 times negative 12 is equal to negative 96. All right, so that's relating our division to our multiplying. And hopefully you're noticing all those negative signs. Remember the little rule here, if there's only one, it's going to come out negative. If it's the opposite of the opposite, it comes out positive. 1 comes out negative, opposite of the opposite comes out positive. All right, so let's find the quotient quickly of each of these. All right, opposite of opposite, positive, and that one's going to be 12. Number 14, only 1, which means our answer is negative. 18 into 3 is going to be 6 times. 108 divided by negative 12, I see only one negative, so our answer is negative. How many 12s did we get out of 108? Well, the answer is 9. And if you needed to check, remember it's work backwards with multiplying if you need to. How about 45 divided by 3 gives us 15, and it's negative, negative, so that comes out positive. Opposite of the opposite. Number 17, 8 divided by negative 2. I see one negative, so it's going to be negative 4. Negative 10 divided by negative 5. Opposite of the opposite, so it's positive 2. I only see one negative sign here, so this is going to be negative, and 24 divided by 3 is 8. Number 20, negative 18 divided by 6. So I only see one negative, so our answer is negative, and 18 divided by 6 is 3. Negative, negative comes out positive, and that's going to be a 9. 15 divided by 3 we know is 5, but I see a negative in there, so it's really negative 5. Oh, down to this little section here. Let's remember how to add and subtract as well. Okay, remember this is adding, so it's a little different. Negative 16 plus negative 4 means I have 16 negatives. I'm not going to write them all out, but 16 negatives and then 4 more negatives. So that's going to be all negatives, and that's 20 because we're adding. Number 24, negative 16 minus the negative. Oh, there's a subtraction. We add the opposite. Negative 16 plus 4 means some of those are going to cancel out, but I'd be left with, we have more negatives, and I have 12 more negatives than positives, so that's negative 12. Number 25, now we're back to multiplying. 16 times 4, so let's do that work. 16 times 4, let's see, that's 24, and 4 and 2 is 6, so we get a 64 here, and it's the opposite of the opposite, so it's positive 64. 16 divided by 4 is just 4, and the opposite of the opposite means that it come out positive 4. Number 27, select all that are equivalent to negative 35 over 7. So that's a division statement. So notice I only have one negative here, and it floats to the front most of the time. But that means I can apply it to the top number and still have one negative, so that one would work. It can float to the bottom and still have one negative, that one would work. Over here on choice D, now I have 2. That's the opposite of the opposite, so that's not going to come out negative. Remember, we want this to come out negative, so that's, nope, not going to work. Here I have the opposite of the opposite. Nope, not going to work. Ooh, but here, look at how many negatives we've got here. Let's think, okay, the opposite of the opposite, so that would be positive, but the opposite again would come out negative, and so that one works as well. So all 3 of those come out negative. All right, so here's our little rule, multiplying and dividing integers rule. When multiplying and dividing, if the signs are the same, the answer is positive. So positive times a positive, negative times a negative, so those would cancel out to positives. When multiplying and dividing, if the signs are different, the answer will be negative. Negative times a positive is negative. And so if we only have one, it comes out negative. Do not confuse these with the adding and subtracting rules. All right, down here, number 28. And remember, you can always pause this and go back and watch these things again if you need to. Let's look at real life situations. Jasmine borrowed a total of $48. Oh, she borrowed a total of $48. So she is $48 in debt. That's a negative 48. By borrowing the same amount of money from 6 different friends, how much money does she owe each friend? So she's got to pay it back now. So she's got to put this into groups for those 6 friends. So that means we're going to divide this by 6. All right, so I only see one negative there, so that's an owing sign. So she owes some money, and 48 divided by 6 is 8. So she owes each friend $8. All right, let's look at Joseph borrowed $6 a day. Borrowed $6 a day until he had borrowed a total of $72. So there's our total. For how many days did he borrow money? So he took that 72 days and borrowed $6 a day until he had borrowed a total of 72. So since we know the big total here and we're trying to break that big total up into groups, we divide it. And so that means 72 divided by 6. Let's try that just in case you need to. You can write it here. 6 goes into 7 one time. We would have 1 left over. 6 goes into 12 2 times. So that would be nothing left over there. So we get 12, and it's a negative because we had 1 negative. So Joseph borrowed $6 a day until he had borrowed a total of $72. How many days did he borrow money? So that's how we would set up the division. You could also think of it as negative 6 times something is going to be equal to negative 72. You can think of it that way. And so he had borrowed a total of, we should have a negative there. He borrowed a total of $72, and so we can think of it that way. And so for how many days did he borrow money? Joseph borrowed money for how many days? Oh my gosh, 12 days. 12 days he borrowed money. That's like, hey, can I borrow some money for lunch? Sure. Next day, hey, can I borrow some money for lunch? Sure. Next day, hey, could I borrow some money for lunch? Sure. 12 days of that. That's a lot. Stop borrowing money from people. Oh my goodness. All right. Make sure that you take your exit ticket at the end of this and let me know if you have questions. Yay, math.